The November morning I discovered my wife's secret life started like any other Saturday in our Westlake Hills home. Victoria had left before dawn for what she called a private banking retreat in Dallas, kissing my forehead and whispering something about portfolio strategies for her high-net-worth clients. Ethan was already at rowing practice preparing for his Yale interviews, and Sophia had slept over at her friend's house after the debate tournament. For the first time in months, I had the house to myself. As a senior assistant U.S. attorney specializing in white-collar crime, weekends were rare luxuries. Between grand jury proceedings, depositions, and the endless stream of financial fraud cases crossing my desk, I couldn't remember the last time I'd had an entire Saturday free. The irony wasn't lost on me that Victoria, an investment advisor managing $50 million in client assets, worked more weekends than I did. Standing in our kitchen with my coffee, looking out at Lake Austin through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I felt that familiar tug of guilt. 19 years of marriage, and we'd both become so consumed with our careers that family dinners had become scheduling negotiations. Victoria's BMW sat in the driveway, collecting Austin's notorious oak pollen, and I decided to surprise her with a thorough detailing before she returned Sunday evening. The November sun was perfect for car washing, warm enough to work comfortably, but not so hot that the soap would dry instantly. I pulled Victoria's pearl-white BMW into the shade of our oak trees and gathered my supplies from the garage. As a federal prosecutor, I approached everything methodically, and car detailing was no exception. Vacuum first, then interior wipe down, followed by exterior wash and wax. Victoria kept her car immaculate. Too immaculate, actually. I'd always joked that her BMW looked like a showroom model, not a vehicle driven by someone who managed client portfolios across 3 states. But then again, image was everything in her business. Her clients expected their financial advisor to project success and attention to detail. I started with the passenger side, running the vacuum under the seats to catch any debris. The vacuum's suction pulled at something lodged between the seat and center console, and I had to work it loose with my fingers. It was a crumpled piece of paper, folded and compressed into a tight wad. My first instinct was to throw it away. Victoria was notorious for stuffing receipts and business cards into random places when she was in a hurry. But as I smoothed out the paper, the familiar orange and black T-Mobile logo stopped me cold. We'd been Verizon customers for over a decade. My federal employee plan gave us excellent rates and coverage, and we'd never had reason to switch. Victoria's iPhone, like mine and the kids, was on our family plan. There was absolutely no reason for her to have a T-Mobile account. I sat on the car's running board and examined the bill more carefully. The account holder was listed as Victoria Sterling, Victoria's maiden name, which she hadn't used professionally since we married. The phone number wasn't familiar, and the billing address was for a P.O. box in Austin I'd never heard of. The charges were substantial. $340 for a single month, mostly data, and what appeared to be an unlimited calling plan. I flipped to the detailed usage section, and my prosecutor's eye immediately caught the patterns. Dozens of calls throughout September and October, mostly during business hours, but scattered throughout evenings and weekends too. Numbers I didn't recognize. Text message volumes that seemed excessive for business use. International data charges that made no sense for someone who claimed to only travel domestically for client meetings. I sat there in my driveway, holding evidence of something I couldn't yet name, feeling the same cold certainty I got when reviewing financial records in my fraud cases. The patterns were wrong. The secrecy was wrong. Everything about this bill screamed deception. But deception about what? My marriage to Victoria had weathered the usual storms. Career pressures, parenting disagreements, the gradual drift that comes when 2 ambitious people get caught up in building their separate professional worlds. But infidelity? That seemed impossible. Victoria was many things, driven, sometimes cold, occasionally absent. But she wasn't a cheater. Or was she? I thought about the changes I'd noticed over the past 6 months. The increased travel, the mysterious evening meetings, the new designer clothes that seemed more expensive than her usual professional wardrobe. Her explanations had always been reasonable. New clients with demanding schedules, industry conferences, the need to look the part when managing money for Austin's elite. But now, holding this bill, those explanations felt hollow. I photographed the bill with my iPhone, making sure to capture the account details and usage patterns. 20 years of prosecuting financial crimes had taught me to document everything before confronting anyone. Then, I carefully folded the bill and slipped it into my pocket. The car washing could wait. Back in my home office, I spread the bill on my desk and started building what I'd come to think of as a case file. As a federal prosecutor, I knew that solid cases were built on systematic evidence gathering, not emotional reactions or hasty confrontations. The phone number listed as the primary line on Victoria's secret account was the key. I stared at it for several minutes, weighing my options. I could wait until Victoria returned and simply ask her about it directly. Or I could do what my prosecutor's instincts were screaming at me to do. Investigate first, confront later. I picked up my phone and dialed the number. It rang twice before a professional female voice answered. Elite Companions, this is Jade. How can I help you? My blood went cold. Elite Companions. Even without context, the name suggested something that made my stomach clench. I stammered, trying to sound casual while my mind raced. This is regarding service appointments. Of course, Jade's voice was warm and efficient. Are you calling about Victoria's schedule? She's completely booked this weekend with her Dallas clients, but I can check Monday availability. She's become one of our most requested companions. Her investment background really sets her apart from our other girls. The words hit me like physical blows. Companions. Other girls. The implications crashed over me in waves, each one worse than the last. Actually, I managed. I need to verify some information first. Can you tell me what services Victoria typically provides? Well, Jade said, and I could hear papers rustling. Victoria specializes in what we call executive companionship. Business dinners, corporate events, weekend getaways. She's perfect for clients who need someone sophisticated who can discuss financial markets and investment strategies. Her rate structure reflects her expertise. $800 an hour for business consultations, $2,500 for overnight portfolio strategy sessions. I was taking notes automatically, my prosecutor training kicking in even as my personal world collapsed. $800 an hour, $2,500 for overnight sessions. The math was brutal. If Victoria was working the schedule this bill suggested, she was making far more from prostitution than from her legitimate career. And she's been with your agency how long? I asked. About 18 months now, Jade replied. Started part-time while maintaining her day job, but she's really grown into one of our premium offerings. Clients specifically request her for multi-day engagements because she can actually discuss their portfolios intelligently. It's not just companionship. It's like having a beautiful financial consultant who provides additional services. 18 months. While I'd been prosecuting criminals and raising our children, my wife had been building a second career as a high-end escort. I appreciate the information, I said carefully. I'll call back about scheduling. Perfect. And sir? If you're a new client, I should mention that Victoria does require references and typically meets new clients in public first. She's very selective about her clientele. I hung up and sat in my office, staring at the notes I'd scrawled during the conversation. The evidence was overwhelming and damning, but I needed more. I needed to understand the scope of Victoria's operation, the legal implications, and most importantly, how to protect my children from the fallout. My first call was to Kyle Barnes, an FBI agent I'd worked with on several federal fraud cases. Kyle specialized in interstate criminal enterprises, and if Elite Companions was operating across state lines, it fell under federal jurisdiction. Kyle, it's Brandon Mitchell. I need a consultation on something sensitive. What's up, counselor? You sound like someone just told you the jury came back with an acquittal. Worse. I need information about an escort service called Elite Companions, operating here in Austin. Completely confidential. There was a long pause. Brandon, please tell me you're not calling as a potential client. God, no, but I can't explain over the phone. Can we meet? How about the Federal Building? 1 hour? Kyle's office in the Federal Building downtown was a familiar space. I'd spent countless hours there coordinating prosecutions with the FBI. But sitting across from Kyle's desk as a person with a personal crisis instead of a professional colleague felt surreal. Talk to me, Kyle said, closing his office door. I told him everything. The phone bill, the call to Elite Companions, Victoria's 18 months of secret prostitution. Kyle listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes in his meticulous handwriting. Brandon, he said when I finished, I need you to know that Elite Companions is already on our radar. My stomach dropped. Meaning what? Meaning we've been building a case against them for the past 6 months. Tax evasion, money laundering, operating across state lines without proper licensing. It's a sophisticated operation targeting high-profile clients in Austin's business and political community. And my wife is neck-deep in federal crimes. Kyle's expression was sympathetic but professional. The good news is that her cooperation could potentially mitigate her exposure. The bad news is that she's not just a worker. From what we've observed, she's moved into management roles. Management roles. Victoria wasn't just selling herself. She was helping run the operation. What kind of exposure are we talking about? I asked. Conspiracy, money laundering, tax evasion, interstate transportation for prostitution purposes. If she's been earning what you described and not reporting it, the IRS charges alone could put her away for years. Kyle pulled out a thick file folder and spread several surveillance photos across his desk. Victoria's face stared back at me from multiple angles, entering upscale hotels, meeting men in expensive suits, handling what appeared to be cash transactions. We know she's been operating under the name Madison on their website, Kyle continued. Her profile markets her as an investment advisor who provides financial consultation and companionship. Very clever cover, actually. How clever? She uses her legitimate financial knowledge to justify meetings with clients. Business dinners become covers for prostitution. Investment consultations become cover for money laundering. She's been taking escort payments and investing them through legitimate accounts at her day job. The scope of Victoria's deception was staggering. She'd weaponized everything, her career, her expertise, our family's reputation, to build a criminal enterprise. Kyle, I need to know about my ethical obligations here, as a federal prosecutor whose wife is involved in federal crimes. You need to report this to the DOJ ethics office immediately, Kyle said. You'll have to recuse yourself from any cases that might intersect with Elite Companions or related investigations. But Brandon, the fact that you discovered this and brought it to law enforcement immediately works in your favor. What about my family? My kids? That's the hardest part. When this goes public, and it will go public, your children will be affected. But your career? If you handle this correctly, it might actually enhance your reputation as a prosecutor who puts duty above personal considerations. Kyle outlined the next steps. I would document everything I discovered and turn it over to the FBI. I would report the conflict to DOJ ethics. I would cooperate fully with the investigation while preparing my family for the inevitable storm. One more thing, Kyle said as I prepared to leave. Victoria's client list includes some very prominent Austin figures. When this breaks, it's going to be bigger than just prostitution charges. How much bigger? Federal judges, city council members, state legislators. Elite Companions wasn't just running escorts. They were systematically targeting married officials who could be leveraged for political and business favors. Driving home from the Federal Building, I realized that Victoria's betrayal extended far beyond our marriage. She'd become part of a criminal conspiracy that threatened the integrity of Austin's political and judicial systems. The wife I'd trusted with our children's future had spent 18 months building a blackmail operation against the city's power structure. That evening, I sat in my home office preparing for the most difficult weekend of my life. Victoria would return Sunday night expecting normal family dinner conversation about her client retreat. Instead, she'd find a husband who knew everything and an FBI investigation that was about to destroy her life. I called my brother David in Houston and asked him to take Ethan and Sophia for a few days starting Monday. I couldn't explain why over the phone, but David heard something in my voice that made him agree without questions. By Sunday afternoon, I documented everything, reported to DOJ ethics, and coordinated with Kyle on the timing of Victoria's arrest. The FBI would move on elite companions Monday morning, giving me just enough time to confront Victoria and attempt to minimize the trauma for our children. Victoria's BMW pulled into our driveway at 7:30 Sunday evening, right on schedule. I watched from our kitchen window as she gathered her designer luggage and walked toward our front door with the confident stride of someone who believed her secret was safe. "Hey, honey," she called, setting her bags down in our foyer. "How was your weekend?" I stepped out of the kitchen, and she must have seen something in my expression because her smile faltered. "We need to talk," I said. Victoria's transformation was immediate and complete. The warm, tired wife disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating that I barely recognized. "About what?" she asked, but her eyes were already scanning for escape routes. I pulled the T-Mobile bill from my pocket and placed it on our hallway table. "About elite companions, about 18 months of prostitution, about the federal investigation that's going to destroy your life tomorrow morning." Victoria stared at the bill for a long moment, then slowly looked up at me. "You went through my car. I detailed your car and found evidence of federal crimes." "Federal crimes?" She laughed, but it was harsh and brittle. "Brandon, you're being dramatic. I provide companionship services to business clients. It's perfectly legal. $800 an hour for business consultations, $2,500 for overnight portfolio strategy sessions." "Victoria, I talked to Jade at your agency. I know what you've been doing." "You called Jade?" For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "I called Jade. I called the FBI. I reported everything to DOJ ethics. The only question now is whether you cooperate with the investigation or go down with the entire operation." Victoria sat down heavily on our stairs, and for a moment I glimpsed the woman I'd married 19 years ago. But then her expression hardened again. "You have no idea what you've done," she said quietly. "I've done exactly what any federal prosecutor should do when discovering evidence of criminal activity. The fact that the criminal is my wife doesn't change my obligations." "Your obligations?" Victoria's voice rose. "What about your obligations to your family? To protecting your children from scandal? To preserving the life we've built? You destroyed that life 18 months ago when you became a prostitute." "I became a businesswoman." Victoria stood up, her face flushed with anger. "Do you have any idea how much money I've made? How much financial security I've provided for this family? With money earned through prostitution and hidden from the IRS. Victoria, you're looking at federal conspiracy charges, money laundering, tax evasion. You could go to prison for years. Only if you testify against me. Only if you cooperate with their investigation." The implication hung between us. Victoria was asking me to choose between my oath as a federal prosecutor and my loyalty as a husband. "I've already cooperated," I said. "I turned over the evidence this afternoon." Victoria stared at me for a long moment, then picked up her designer handbag and walked toward our front door. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To find a lawyer. Don't wait up." She left without another word, and I knew our marriage had ended in that moment. Not because of the prostitution, though that was devastating enough, It ended because Victoria had asked me to betray everything I believed in to protect her criminal enterprise. I called David again and asked him to pick up the kids immediately before school Monday morning. I couldn't explain everything over the phone, but I told him their mother was about to be arrested and I needed them away from Austin until the media storm passed. Jesus, Brandon, what did she do? I'll explain everything when you get here. Just please, get them out of town before this becomes public. David agreed to drive up that night. I spent the next few hours crafting careful explanations for Ethan and Sophia that focused on their mother making serious mistakes that would require legal consequences. Without getting into the specifics, they were too young to process. At 6 Monday morning, Kyle called with an update. "We're moving in an hour," he said. "Coordinated raids on elite companions' offices, Victoria's apartment we didn't know about, and associated bank accounts. Is she still at your house?" "She left last night to find a lawyer." "Probably smart. Brandon, you should know that when we arrest her, this becomes public. Are you prepared for that?" "My kids are safe with my brother in Houston. I'm as prepared as anyone can be for their life to explode." "Your life isn't exploding. Victoria's is. There's a difference." At 8:15 Monday morning, my phone started ringing with calls from reporters. The FBI raids had been massive and coordinated, involving not just elite companions but a network of associated businesses and bank accounts across 3 states. Victoria had been arrested at her lawyer's office, along with 12 other escorts and the agency's management team. But the real story was the client list. Federal Judge Thomas Webb, who'd presided over several of my white-collar crime cases, was among the clients. City Councilman David Park had used city funds to pay for escorts. 3 state legislators had traded votes for sexual services. A federal prosecutor's wife had spent 18 months at the center of the largest political corruption scandal in Austin's history. Kyle called me at noon with details I wouldn't see in the news coverage. "Victoria's cooperation is going to be essential," he said. "The client list includes 847 names, including federal officials, judges, and politicians. Without her testimony about the blackmail and influence operations, we might not be able to prosecute the corruption charges." Blackmail? Elite Companions wasn't just selling sex, Brandon. They were systematically targeting married officials and recording sessions for leverage. Victoria wasn't just managing escorts. She was managing a political intelligence operation. The scope of Victoria's betrayal continued to expand. Not only had she prostituted herself and hidden criminal proceeds from our family, she'd participated in corrupting Austin's government institutions. "What's her exposure looking like?" I asked. "Significant. But if she cooperates fully, we might be able to recommend reduced sentencing. The key is going to be her willingness to testify against the clients and other conspirators." That afternoon, Victoria's attorney called me directly. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Sarah Goldman representing your wife. I need to discuss the possibility of Victoria cooperating with the federal investigation." "Talk to the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm recused from anything involving this case." "I understand, but Victoria specifically wanted me to ask if you would consider speaking with her before she makes any decisions about cooperation." "No. Mr. Mitchell, your wife's future depends on the cooperation agreement she signs. A conversation with you might help her understand the importance of being completely honest with investigators." "Ms. Goldman, Victoria spent 18 months lying to me about being a prostitute and participating in political corruption. I have no interest in helping her understand honesty." "I see. And the divorce proceedings?" "Will be filed tomorrow morning." Victoria's arraignment was scheduled for Wednesday. As a federal prosecutor, I'd attended hundreds of similar proceedings, but watching my wife stand before a federal magistrate in an orange jumpsuit was surreal. The charges were extensive: conspiracy to commit money laundering, tax evasion, interstate transportation for prostitution, operating an unlicensed business, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. Victoria pled not guilty to all charges, and her attorney requested reasonable bail given her community ties and lack of flight risk. The prosecutor, my colleague Janet Morrison, who'd taken over the case when I recused myself, argued that Victoria was a sophisticated criminal who'd hidden her activities for 18 months and posed an ongoing danger to the community. Your Honor, Janet said, Ms. Mitchell wasn't just participating in prostitution. Evidence suggests she was instrumental in a conspiracy to blackmail and corrupt federal and state officials. Her cooperation with this ongoing investigation is essential, but her release would potentially jeopardize witness safety and evidence preservation. The magistrate set bail at $500,000, secured by property. Victoria's parents posted bail using their ranch outside Austin, and she was released with electronic monitoring and strict travel restrictions. That evening, Victoria called me from her parents' house. Brandon, I need you to know that I never intended for things to go this far. How far did you intend them to go? It started as occasional companionship for wealthy clients who wanted intelligent conversation at business functions. $800 for a few hours of playing the sophisticated financial advisor. And then clients started requesting more intimate services. The money was incredible, more in one weekend than I made in a month at the firm. I told myself it was temporary, just until we paid off the house and built college funds for the kids. 18 months, Victoria. That's not temporary. I know. And then elite companions started asking me to recruit other educated women, lawyers, accountants, doctors who could appeal to high-end clients. Before I knew it, I was helping manage the entire operation, including the blackmail and political corruption. There was a long pause. Brandon, some of our clients were using our services to gain business advantages or political favors. We weren't blackmailing anyone, but we were documenting encounters for liability protection. Liability protection. You were recording federal judges having sex with prostitutes for liability protection. For our protection, yes, in case clients claimed assault or refused payment. Victoria, you recorded a federal judge who presided over my cases having sex with a prostitute. Do you understand what that means for my career? For our family's reputation? I understand that I've destroyed everything we built together. But Brandon, if I cooperate fully with the investigation, Janet Morrison says I might get reduced sentencing. I could be out in 18 months instead of 10 years. Then cooperate. The cooperation agreement requires me to detail every client encounter, every payment, every conversation about political favors or business deals. It means testifying against federal judges and state legislators in open court. Then testify. Brandon, some of these men are your friends. Judge Webb wrote recommendation letters for your federal prosecutor position. Councilman Park appointed you to the Criminal Justice Reform Commission. If I testify against them, you'll be associated with the scandal that brought them down. I realized that Victoria was still trying to manipulate me, even after her arrest and arraignment. She wanted me to advise her against cooperation to protect my own career prospects. Victoria, here's what's going to happen. You're going to cooperate fully with the federal investigation. You're going to testify truthfully against every client and co-conspirator. You're going to pay whatever restitution is required, and I'm going to divorce you and seek primary custody of our children. Brandon, I'm not finished. If you think I'm going to sacrifice my integrity or my oath as a federal prosecutor to protect you from the consequences of 18 months of prostitution and political corruption, you fundamentally misunderstood who you married. And if my cooperation destroys your relationships with judges and politicians, then those relationships were never worth having. I hung up and immediately called my divorce attorney to accelerate the proceedings. The next morning's Austin American-Statesman carried the story on the front page. Federal prosecutor's wife arrested in elite escort scandal. The article included details about the client list, the political corruption allegations, and my cooperation with the FBI investigation. My phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, colleagues, and friends, Most were supportive, recognizing that I'd done exactly what any ethical prosecutor should do when discovering evidence of criminal activity. But some questioned whether I'd been too quick to turn in my own wife, whether family loyalty should have taken precedence over professional obligations. U.S. Attorney Margaret Johns called me personally to discuss my status. "Brandon, I want you to know that your handling of this situation has been exemplary. The DOJ Ethics Office has cleared you of any wrongdoing, and your cooperation with the investigation demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity we expect from federal prosecutors." "Thank you, Margaret, but I know this creates complications for the office." "Actually, it does the opposite. When the public sees that we hold ourselves to the same standards we apply to others, it strengthens confidence in federal law enforcement. You've demonstrated that no one is above the law, not even family members of prosecutors." "What about my caseload? I know several of my current defendants will try to claim prosecutorial misconduct based on my wife's activities. Janet Morrison is reviewing all your active cases for potential conflicts. We'll reassign anything that might be compromised, but most of your work shouldn't be affected." "And future assignments?" "Brandon, if you handle the next few months professionally, and I expect you will, this experience could actually enhance your career prospects. Prosecutors who demonstrate unshakable integrity under personal pressure are exactly who we want in leadership positions." Margaret's confidence was reassuring, but I knew the next few months would test everything I believed about justice, family, and professional responsibility. Victoria's cooperation with the FBI began the following week. According to Kyle, she was providing detailed information about Elite Companion's operations, client relationships, and financial structures. Her testimony would be crucial for prosecuting the political corruption charges, but it would also extend the investigation for months. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Victoria's criminal charges eliminated any possibility of fighting for custody or significant assets. My attorney, Patricia Hendricks, had been preparing divorce cases for 20 years, but she'd never seen such clear-cut circumstances. "Brandon, Victoria's criminal conviction, and it will be a conviction, gives us enormous leverage in property division and custody arrangements," Patricia explained during our first meeting. "Texas law allows courts to consider criminal activity when dividing marital assets." "What does that mean practically?" "It means the court can award you a disproportionate share of legitimate marital assets while ensuring that Victoria doesn't benefit from criminal proceeds. The federal government will seize any money earned through Elite Companions, but your retirement accounts, home equity, and other legitimate assets can be protected." "And custody?" Victoria's criminal conviction, particularly for crimes involving moral turpitude, makes supervised visitation the likely outcome. Courts prioritize children's welfare, and a parent convicted of prostitution and political corruption poses reputational and safety risks. The legal machinery was working in my favor, but I was more concerned about Ethan and Sophia's emotional welfare. David had enrolled them in Houston schools temporarily, but they needed stability and honest communication about their mother's situation. I drove to Houston the weekend after Victoria's arraignment to have the conversation I'd been dreading. "Dad, the news articles are saying Mom was a prostitute," Sophia said bluntly as soon as I arrived at David's house. "Is that true?" 17 and 15 years old enough to understand adult realities but young enough to be devastated by them. "Yes," I said. "Your mother was working as a high-end escort while maintaining her day job as an investment advisor." "For how long?" Ethan asked. "About 18 months." "And you didn't know?" Sophia's voice carried accusation. "I didn't know. I discovered evidence by accident and immediately reported it to law enforcement." "You turned in our mom?" Ethan's expression was stunned. "I turned in evidence of federal crimes. The fact that your mother was committing those crimes doesn't change my obligation as a federal prosecutor." "But she's our mom," Sophia said, tears starting. "Yes, she is. And she's also a criminal who chose to engage in prostitution and political corruption for 18 months while lying to our family every day. David had been listening from the kitchen doorway. Kids, your dad did exactly what he should have done. When people we love break the law, we don't protect them from consequences. We help them face those consequences honestly. What happens to Mom now? Ethan asked. She'll probably plead guilty and cooperate with the federal investigation. If she's honest and helpful, she might get reduced sentencing. But she's going to prison, and she's going to lose her career and professional licenses. What happens to us? Sophia asked. You'll live with me. Your mother will have supervised visitation rights when she's released. You'll continue in your schools and activities. We'll rebuild our family without the lies and deception. Will people always know? Ethan asked. When I apply to colleges, when I interview for jobs, will they always know my mom was a prostitute? It was the question I'd been dreading because I didn't have a good answer. People will know about the scandal, I said honestly. But people will also know that your father upheld his oath and did the right thing when tested. Your character and achievements will matter more than your mother's mistakes. But it's still going to follow us forever, Sophia said. Yes, probably. And I'm sorry about that. But hiding from truth or protecting criminals, even when they're family, would have made everything worse. We spent the weekend talking through practical arrangements. Ethan would finish his senior year in Houston and apply to colleges from there. Sophia would return to Austin with me for the spring semester. Both would receive counseling to help process their mother's betrayal and its consequences. David pulled me aside Sunday evening before I drove back to Austin. How are you holding up? He asked. I'm angry, I'm embarrassed. I'm worried about the kids, but I'm not second-guessing what I did. Good. Because you did the only thing a man with integrity could do. The thing is, David, I keep waiting to feel worse about destroying Victoria's life. But mostly I feel relieved that the lies are over. That's because you spent 18 months living with someone who was lying to you every day. Relief is a normal response to truth, even painful truth. Driving back to Austin Sunday night, I realized that my life had split into two distinct phases. Before I found the T-Mobile bill and after. The before phase had been built on lies and criminal proceeds. The after phase would be built on truth and integrity, even when that truth was devastating. Monday morning brought news that Victoria had signed a comprehensive cooperation agreement with the FBI. According to Kyle, she would testify before federal grand juries investigating political corruption, provide financial records, documenting money laundering, and assist in prosecuting other members of the elite companions conspiracy. Her testimony is going to be devastating for the officials involved, Kyle told me over lunch near the federal building. She kept detailed records of client requests for political favors, business advantages, and regulatory interventions. How detailed? Detailed enough to support RICO charges against a conspiracy that spans 3 levels of government. Judge Webb accepted bribes in the form of sexual services in exchange for favorable rulings in civil cases. Councilman Park traded votes on zoning variances for escort services. State Representative Martinez provided advance notice of legislation affecting specific businesses in exchange for access to elite companions escorts. And Victoria documented all of this? Victoria coordinated much of it. Elite Companions wasn't just a prostitution ring. It was a political intelligence operation that used sexual services to corrupt government officials. The scope of Victoria's criminal activity continued to amaze me. She'd transformed from wife and mother into the coordinator of a sophisticated corruption conspiracy that threatened the integrity of Austin's government institutions. Kyle, what's the federal government's position on asset forfeiture? We're seizing everything directly traceable to criminal proceeds. Victoria's hidden bank accounts, the luxury items purchased with escort money, and any property bought with criminal funds. But we're not touching legitimate marital assets. Your house, retirement accounts, kids' college funds. That's something, I guess. Brandon, there's something else you should know. Victoria's cooperation is exceptional. She's providing evidence that's going to result in the largest political corruption prosecutions in Texas history. If she maintains this level of cooperation through trials, her sentencing recommendation could be significantly reduced. Meaning what? Meaning she might serve 18 to 24 months instead of 8 to 10 years. Despite everything Victoria had done, I found myself hoping she would get the reduced sentence. Not because she deserved mercy, but because our children deserved to have their mother available when they were ready for a relationship with her. That evening, Victoria called me from her parents' house. "Brandon, I wanted you to know that I'm cooperating fully with the investigation." I heard. I also wanted to apologize, not just for the prostitution, but for asking you to compromise your integrity to protect me. I should have known better. You should have known better 18 months ago before you became a prostitute. You're right. But I want you to understand that I never intended to hurt our children or damage your career. Victoria, intent doesn't matter when someone spends 18 months building a criminal enterprise and lying to their family every day. I know. I want you to know that I loved our life together, even while I was destroying it. If you loved our life together, you wouldn't have risked everything for money and excitement. You're right about that too. There was a long pause. Brandon, do you think our children will ever forgive me? I think they'll forgive you eventually, but I don't think they'll ever trust you the way they did before. And you? I'll never forgive you, Victoria, but I'll work with you to minimize the damage to Ethan and Sophia. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. The federal grand jury proceedings began in December. Victoria testified for 3 days, providing detailed evidence about Elite Companions' operations and the political corruption conspiracy. According to news reports, her testimony was compelling and comprehensive, implicating dozens of Austin officials in criminal activity. Judge Webb was the first to resign, citing personal circumstances that make continued service inappropriate. Councilman Park followed within a week, claiming he needed to focus on family obligations. State Representative Martinez announced he wouldn't seek re-election, saying he wanted to pursue opportunities in the private sector. Each resignation validated Victoria's testimony and strengthened the federal government's case against the remaining defendants. The Austin American-Statesman ran a series of investigative articles about the Elite Companion scandal, focusing on the systematic corruption of Austin's political institutions. One article specifically highlighted my cooperation with the FBI investigation. Federal prosecutor Brandon Mitchell's decision to report his wife's criminal activity demonstrates the kind of ethical leadership Austin needs in law enforcement. While many spouses might have chosen family loyalty over professional obligation, Mitchell's cooperation with federal investigators shows that no one is above the law. The positive coverage surprised me. I'd expected to be criticized for turning in my own wife, but the community seemed to appreciate that I'd chosen integrity over family loyalty. Margaret Johns called me into her office the week before Christmas. "Brandon, I wanted to discuss your future with the U.S. Attorney's Office." "Am I being reassigned?" "Actually, I'm promoting you. The Elite Companions investigation has demonstrated exceptional ethical leadership under extreme pressure. I'm recommending you for Chief of the White Collar Crime Division." "Margaret, I appreciate the confidence, but my wife's criminal conviction might create complications for the office." "Brandon, your wife's criminal conviction and your ethical response to it are exactly why you're perfect for this position. When federal prosecutors demonstrate unshakable integrity in their personal lives, it strengthens public confidence in federal law enforcement." The promotion was significant. More responsibility, higher salary, and enhanced reputation within the Department of Justice. But it also felt strange to be advancing professionally because of my wife's criminal activity. "When would this take effect?" I asked. "January 1st. Your first major case would be prosecuting the remaining Elite Companions defendants who haven't taken plea agreements, including potential conflict issues with Victoria's cooperation." Janet Morrison will handle Victoria's testimony, but you'd oversee the overall prosecution strategy. The ethics office has cleared your involvement as long as you don't directly examine your wife or negotiate her cooperation agreement. Prosecuting the criminal enterprise my wife had helped build felt like poetic justice. Victoria's betrayal would advance my career while destroying hers. Victoria's sentencing was scheduled for March. Her cooperation agreement recommended a sentence of 18 to 24 months, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She would also pay restitution of $127,000 in taxes, penalties, and victim compensation. The divorce proceedings concluded in February. Judge Patricia Foster reviewed evidence of Victoria's criminal activity and awarded me 85% of legitimate marital assets, primary custody of both children, and the right to seek additional damages for emotional distress and career impact. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Foster said during the final hearing, this court recognizes that you were the victim of an elaborate deception that lasted 18 months. Your wife's criminal activity constituted fraud against your family and posed serious risks to your professional reputation. This property division reflects those extraordinary circumstances. Victoria attended the hearing with her attorney, but didn't contest any of the arrangements. Her guilty plea to federal charges eliminated any leverage in divorce negotiations. Do you understand and accept these custody arrangements? Judge Foster asked Victoria directly. Yes, Your Honor. I understand that my criminal activity makes me an unfit custodial parent, and that supervised visitation is appropriate. Ms. Mitchell, your children's welfare is this court's primary concern. If you successfully complete your prison sentence, pay required restitution, and demonstrate rehabilitation, you may petition for expanded visitation rights. I understand, Your Honor. Walking out of the courthouse after 19 years of marriage felt anticlimactic. No dramatic confrontations, no emotional reconciliation attempts, just legal procedures that formalized what had been obvious since the day I found the T-Mobile bill. Victoria's sentencing hearing in March was packed with reporters and spectators. As chief of the white-collar crime division, I attended professionally rather than personally, sitting with other federal prosecutors while Victoria stood before Judge Raymond Sterling for final sentencing. Ms. Mitchell, Judge Sterling said, your cooperation with federal investigators has been exemplary. You've provided testimony that resulted in the prosecution of dozens of corrupt officials and the dismantling of a sophisticated criminal conspiracy. Thank you, Your Honor. However, your criminal activity was extensive and lasted 18 months. You engaged in prostitution, money laundering, tax evasion, and political corruption while deceiving your family and community about your activities. I understand, Your Honor. The government recommends 18 months incarceration followed by 3 years supervised release. This court sentences you to 21 months federal prison, 3 years supervised release, and restitution of $127,000. Victoria was led away in handcuffs to begin serving her sentence at the federal women's facility in Bryan, Texas. As I watched her disappear through the courthouse doors, I felt relief more than sadness. The lies were finally over. That evening, I called Ethan and Sophia to update them on their mother's sentencing. 21 months isn't that long, Sophia said hopefully. No, it's not. Your mother could be released in 15 months with good behavior. Will we visit her in prison? Ethan asked. That's your decision. I'll arrange visits if you want them, but I won't pressure you either way. I want to see her, Sophia said immediately. I need to think about it, Ethan said. Both responses seemed healthy. Sophia needed to maintain connection with her mother despite the betrayal. Ethan needed time to process his anger before deciding about visitation. Over the next year, life developed new routines. Sophia returned to Austin and excelled in school, despite the social awkwardness of having a mother in federal prison. Ethan thrived at Rice University, where he transferred after his gap year. Both kids attended counseling and gradually processed their mother's betrayal. I began dating Amanda Torres, a federal judge whose husband had died of cancer 3 years earlier. Amanda understood the demands of federal service and the importance of maintaining integrity under pressure. Our relationship developed slowly, built on shared values rather than physical attraction or emotional need. Victoria called me monthly from federal prison, updating me on her rehabilitation programs and requesting information about the children. Our conversations were civil but distant, necessary communication between co-parents rather than former spouses. "Brandon, I want you to know that I'm participating in every available program here," Victoria said during one call. "Financial crimes education, substance abuse counseling, vocational training. I'm glad you're using the time constructively. I've also been thinking about what I'll do when I'm released. Obviously, I can't return to financial services, but I might be able to find work in retail or food service. That's realistic. I know I'll never have a professional career again, and I know our marriage is over, but I hope I can eventually have a relationship with Ethan and Sophia. That depends on them, not me. I understand. But Brandon, do you think they'll ever be able to respect me again? I think they'll love you because you're their mother. But respect? That's something you'll have to earn over many years. I deserve that. Yes, you do." Victoria was released to a federal halfway house in Austin after serving 15 months. She found work at a coffee shop near the university, earning minimum wage and living in supervised housing. Her felony convictions eliminated any possibility of professional licensing or significant employment. The kids' reactions to her release were complex. Sophia visited regularly and gradually rebuilt a relationship with her mother. Ethan remained distant, but agreed to occasional family dinners when Victoria proved she could maintain employment and sobriety. My own career continued advancing. The Elite Companions prosecutions resulted in convictions of 43 defendants, including 7 elected officials and 2 federal judges. The success of those prosecutions, combined with my demonstrated integrity during personal crisis, led to consideration for a federal judgeship. 2 years after Victoria's release, Senator Patricia Williams recommended me for a vacancy on the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas. The confirmation process focused heavily on my ethical leadership during the Elite Companion scandal. "Judge Mitchell," Senator Williams said during my confirmation hearing, "your handling of your wife's criminal activity demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity we need on the federal bench. Can you tell this committee how that experience shaped your judicial philosophy?" "Senator, that experience taught me that justice must be impartial, even when personal relationships are involved. The law applies equally to everyone, regardless of family connections, professional status, or personal considerations. And if you faced similar ethical challenges as a federal judge, I would apply the same standard I've always applied. The oath I took as a prosecutor requires me to uphold the law regardless of personal cost." My confirmation was unanimous. The Senate recognized that prosecutors who demonstrate unshakable integrity under extreme pressure make excellent federal judges. Amanda and I married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with Ethan and Sophia serving as witnesses. Both kids had grown into impressive young adults despite their mother's betrayal. Ethan graduated from Rice with plans to attend law school and become a federal prosecutor. Sophia was accepted to Stanford with intentions of studying criminal justice. Victoria attended the wedding reception at my invitation, sitting quietly in the back and leaving early. Her presence felt appropriate. She was part of our family's history, even if that history included criminal activity and personal betrayal. 5 years after finding the T-Mobile bill in Victoria's car, I was sworn in as a federal judge with Ethan holding the Bible and Sophia administering the oath. Victoria watched from the gallery, wearing a simple dress and working uniform from her coffee shop job. In my remarks after the swearing-in ceremony, I addressed the journey that brought me to the federal bench. Integrity isn't negotiable, even when maintaining it costs everything we think we value. Sometimes doing the right thing requires us to sacrifice personal relationships, financial security, or social standing. But compromising our principles to protect others from consequences ultimately serves no one. After the ceremony, Victoria approached me privately. "Brandon, I wanted to congratulate you on your appointment and thank you for including me today. You're the mother of my children. You'll always be part of our family's story. I know I destroyed everything we built together, but I want you to know that I'm proud of the man you've become and the integrity you've maintained. Victoria, you didn't destroy what we built together. You revealed that what we built together was partly based on lies. The life I have now is built on truth. I understand, and I want you to know that I tell everyone I meet about what you did. How you chose duty over family loyalty. How you reported criminal activity even when it involved your wife. People need to know that kind of integrity still exists." "I hope so." "It does. You proved it." Walking into my chambers as a federal judge, I reflected on the 5 years since discovering Victoria's secret life. Her betrayal had destroyed our marriage and damaged our children, but it had also revealed my own character and advanced my career in ways I never could have imagined. The Elite Companion scandal became a case study in federal ethics training, highlighting how prosecutors should respond when family members engage in criminal activity. My cooperation with the FBI investigation became the standard for ethical behavior under personal pressure. Victoria continued working at the coffee shop, living quietly, and maintaining supervised relationships with our children. Her criminal convictions would follow her forever, eliminating any possibility of professional redemption or financial recovery. But sometimes justice isn't about redemption. Sometimes justice is about consequences that match choices, about integrity that withstands personal pressure, and about serving truth even when truth destroys everything we thought we wanted. I'd found a crumpled phone bill while washing my wife's car, and that discovery had changed everything. Victoria had chosen 18 months of prostitution and political corruption over 19 years of marriage and family. I'd chosen professional integrity over family loyalty. Both of us had to live with those choices. But only one of us had chosen correctly. Sitting in my chambers that first day as a federal judge, reviewing cases that would test my judgment and integrity, I understood that finding Victoria's phone bill hadn't been the end of my story. It had been the beginning of the person I was meant to become. The person I'd always been, underneath the comfortable assumptions of a marriage built partly on lies. A federal prosecutor who became a federal judge because he understood that some things, truth, justice, integrity, are worth more than anything we might sacrifice to preserve them. Even when that sacrifice includes everything we thought we loved.